Welcome back to Upfront with me, Bex. Today I've got a very special guest on. I've got my partner Jack on, and we're going to be talking all things men's mental health. And we're just going to dive straight in.
Straight in questions.
Straight in with the questions.
Jesus.
I'm actually going to do the steroidy ones first to get those out of the way, just because in the first episode we discussed the use of steroids.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't watched that, go back, watch that first. It'll make a lot more sense and it'll give you a good background on the use of steroids. So this is sort of steroid related, but more so bodybuilding,
Mm-hmm.
and more so I think about more so aimed at you as a man.
Who said it?
None of your business.
That says everything.
What are some misconceptions around bodybuilding that are just not true? There is a little thingy, i.e., steroids give you small nuts.
It's the other one. The biggest myth about steroids is they small.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, do you really think people would do steroids if they small for
what you get out of it?
What you get out of it. Some people, as we were just saying, some people think steroids are the be-all and end-all of muscle growth, which they're absolutely not.
Let's give our one each biggest misconceptions about bodybuilding. You can choose if you want to go down the steroids path if you want, but we'll do it from a male and a female perspective.
You go first then, because
Okay.
I'm struggling.
Okay. I think one of the biggest misconceptions with bodybuilding as a female is the progress you can make without the use of steroids, anabolic steroids. I think I know personally, so for my first prep, I was natural. For my second, I wasn't. If you want to call fat burners, I don't know if they come into that, but I'm talking about androgenics.
Fat burners are technically still assisted.
Okay. So assistance from an androgenic perspective, I was natural within my first prep and not in my second. But I was accused a lot in my first prep of, why don't you talk about steroid use? Why don't you talk about this? And I'm genuinely, I was on nothing. But because I just had been training hard and I had naturally grown a fair bit of muscle, fair play to me. Not that I looked good in my first one, but you know what I mean? I looked a damn sight better than I did before. But people assume you are using drugs if you're making good progress. And there are so many absolutely unbelievable natural athletes. And it's all tested in natural feds, so proof's in the pudding. Don't assume just as someone looks great that they're using steroids, because it might just be that they are.
Well, I think that just goes across the board. And anyway, I think as soon as you get a little bit lean, all of a sudden you must be using something. It's not the fact that you're in a deficit and you're doing
an
X
hour on
amount
the
of cardio.
Stairmaster.
Do you know what I mean? It's just like you can't get in that shape without using something. It's just like you have to do the hard part first. If you're not in a deficit and you're taking Clen, funnily enough, you're still fat.
Clen is you've got
a fat burner.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about if anybody's watching this who hasn't.
Clenbuterol is a fat burner.
Yeah. What's your biggest misconception as a male bodybuilder?
The biggest guys are in the gym, when 9 times out of 10 it's the opposite.
The biggest one's the nicest ones.
Exactly. If anything,
like
the little scrawny ones, because they think they know it all.
Okay. So, to tie in with steroid usage, men's mental health, there's a question here. How much does coming off of gear affect your mental health? So, have you ever completely come off from when you started using steroids at, you said 23? Have you ever completely come off in that time to now at 31?
That was, so the first time I did them, I came off and did what's called a PCT, which is a post-cycle therapy, which is basically pills that you take. I think there's an AI blocker in them, and it's to try and promote your nuts producing testosterone again. So just to get you back in like your normal state. So
just quickly, you said earlier a misconception is that it makes your dick small, and now you've just spoken about your nuts stopping. So can you just tell us the effects on your...
So if you take exogenous testosterone, which is a lovely word for fake, so if you're injecting fake testosterone, your body will naturally stop producing testosterone because your brain realizes that you have enough to function. So it will shut down your testosterone production, which happens in your testicles. So your nuts will naturally get smaller because they don't need to function anymore. And that is what it is.
Comment below the walnut emoji if you listen to this podcast.
Yeah, okay.
So your nuts function as normal. You can still finish. Everything works the same. But
if you've come off?
No, when you use steroids.
Yeah.
But if you had it tested, then what's in your...
So your sperm count could potentially be lower and stuff like that
that's
because
what I'm getting at.
Your testicles are not actually producing. So,
but everything functions as normal.
Yeah, if anything, it functions more because...
Does your willy grow?
I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I mean, testosterone, more than normal, you get more red blood cells. So if you've got more red blood cells, when you get an erection, you're putting more blood into the penis. So does it get bigger? Who knows? I'm not the one to ask. I have no personal data on this question.
Interesting.
Well, let's Google it. Let's see if there's a study.
No, I don't like where this is going.
You said it.
Sorry. Okay, so how much does the original question, how much does coming off gear affect your mental health?
100%. So one of the big reasons why people struggle to come off is because they very much like the mental feeling of being on.
How does it make you feel?
It makes you feel a lot more confident, makes you feel a lot more certain of yourself, like a lot less self-doubt, all that sort of stuff. You feel very comfortable in your own skin. And that's what a lot of people get used to. So when you come off, a lot of people miss that feeling because then they suddenly go back to what they used to be before they start taking it, which is why people struggle to come off. It's not because... I was going to say if they've got their blood work done, but 99% people don't get bloods done that are doing steroids. So
do you worry about if for whatever reason you had to stop using steroids, do you worry that like, oh my God, how would I function as a normal man?
Define not taking what?
If
blasting?
You could not, if you had to come off steroids altogether, you could not take them anymore for whatever reason. It's just for the argument's sake of the question. Would you worry about how you would be mentally?
Yeah. But then...
Because that's quite scary.
But that would never happen, really.
Because you hope?
Well, no, because even if I had to go down to what you class as a TRT dose, you would take that till you die.
You could?
You could, yeah.
Okay. So when you came off, you found it affected you badly?
Yeah, because I wasn't ready for that. And then the more I spoke to people about it and saying like, or people were noticing me being a more than usual, or little things were making me snap a little bit more, or my fuse was a lot shorter, etc., then for a time I was like, what the fuck's wrong with me, blah, blah, blah. But then the more I spoke about it, the more it's like, oh, it's because you've come off. I'm just like, wait, what? But then, which rung true? Because when I'd done it again and again and again, those same things had happened. So I was my own little experiment, if you want to call it that.
So for those who don't know, with steroid usage, you go through cycles. So you'll stay on for a period of time, then you'll come down to, like you said, a particular dose, which is a lot less, reduced dose.
There's two ways.
Go on, tell us.
So there's what people like to call blast and cruising. So your blast is where you take as much as you want as possible, or your dosage is as high as it's going to be. And then cruising is where you don't come off completely. You just come down to what your coach or you class as a TRT dose, which stands for testosterone replacement therapy, which is what older men get prescribed if their testosterone is low. And then you would cruise at whatever dose that may be. So to give your body and your organs a break from what you've just put them through without coming off. Because if you come off, which is the other way, so you can either blast or cruise, and then once you finish your cruise, which is normally about 8 to 12 weeks, depending on your blood and all that sort of stuff, then you would blast again. And then like that's the constant cycle. So you never technically come off.
Okay.
The other way is you blast, and then you come off completely and you do what I spoke about earlier, PCT. But the PCT can take about 12 weeks. And then after the 12 weeks, you would just stop. But if you intend on taking steroids again, there's absolutely no reason to PCT, because you're just wasting time, in my opinion. So if let's say you've blasted for 20 weeks, you PCT for 12. So in those 12 weeks, you've got your testicles, your nuts going again.
Mm-hmm. Only to go back on.
Only to then go back on and shut them off again.
Okay.
That's 12 weeks you've wasted, in my opinion, to then get it going again. Because then, depending on what type of steroids you're taking, they can take either days or weeks to get in your system. So then, if you've got your nuts back, then you inject again, then it takes 3 weeks to get in your system. That's another 3 weeks wasted.
Okay.
From a progress point of view, if you're intending on taking them for a very long time, why would you come off?
Okay.
But there's two schools of thoughts. But if you intend to take them again, there's no reason to PCT unless you're trying to conceive and have children or stuff like that. But then I know loads of people that have just cruised or even been on full-on blast and got women pregnant. So it's a very person-dependent.
That leads us a little bit on to the next question. Somebody asked, I think my husband is struggling, and I'm assuming she means with his mental health. But won't open up to me. Do you have any advice?
With men, it's hard, because if they think they can control it, they won't talk to anyone about it. But then if they need actual help, whether it's financial or they just can't do it on their own, like if I know I've got to do something and it's well without my means to actually achieve it on my own, then I'll ask. But if I know I can do it, but it's just going to take a bit of legwork.
Do you ever feel like, I suppose I don't really ask you this in our relationship, but do you ever feel like if you are having a bit of a wobble or you're struggling with something in your head, do you feel like talking about it would help?
No.
Why?
Because I know both outcomes.
So when I'm struggling, it just doesn't matter what it's about, and it helps me to just talk to you. I go by the saying, problem shared is a problem halved. And I really do believe that. I tell all my clients that, I tell all my female friends that. I don't have any male friends apart from you. I would tell everybody around me, if you're struggling, just talk to me about it. Like, it might help. And sometimes it just makes you feel better to say something out loud, but you don't believe that.
No. I think it works for women. It's very...
No, I don't agree with you. I think it works for some people and not for others. I don't think it's anything to do with being a man or woman, because a lot of men really benefit from talking.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that. I always just think, depending on what it is, no matter what it is, it's on me to control it.
And why do you feel like that, do you think?
Because if I can't control it, then what is someone else going to do for me?
Well, the first episodes that I did with Hannah, we spoke about control a lot, and how bodybuilding and having structure, routine, food, training contributes to a mindset of somebody who needs control. Are you controlling in that sense?
All day long. I want to control everything. But then the stuff that I know I physically cannot control, for example, other people or anyone else that can do something that is out of my control, I don't even waste a second thought of it. Because...
What if it's something you care about?
It's irrelevant.
Okay.
If there was something that I really cared about and I still couldn't control it, for example, like when we moved out into the house right now and we're waiting for the green light, I can't control that. I've done all I can.
So you won't allow yourself to be stressed over something that's out of your control, and I will lay and cry about it.
Absolutely. And that goes for everything. Like, if I can control it, whether that's me doing something about it, I will. If it's something that I know physically or mentally there's nothing I can do about it, it will not even sit in my head. It's not worth it. It doesn't benefit anyone.
This is why we're talking about the house. Toby asked, how much stress did it add to your life moving in with Bex?
None. What does he mean?
Well, what have you you been talking to him about?
Nothing.
I'm joking. No stress
It's been
then.
all right. I mean, you have your moments. So do I.
Ooh.
Who doesn't? But, it's what it is, isn't it?
So it's been all right, yeah?
Yeah. Ask me again in 6 months.
Okay. Right, I want to talk just while we're talking about the control then. Have you ever had anything happen in your life that's taken control out of your hands to like an uncomfortable point? Meaning that you maybe can't do the things, we spoke about Hannah's dad when lockdown happened. He could not train anymore, and that for him was a real...
See, it's funny about that, where he couldn't train or didn't have the facilities to train. I made the facilities to train.
Well, he did, because he made the gym in his garden, but I think it was the
social element.
The change in control and change in routine that...
Yeah, which I think was hard for everyone. But then as soon as I realised I could still scratch my training itch from one way or another, I still had control over that.
So it just didn't affect you in a negative way?
No, there was a couple of weeks where I couldn't train, and that was but because I knew there was something in the pipeline that could fruition into me being able to train, then I wouldn't worry about it. Because and then until, let's say I couldn't train for 2 weeks, but after 2 weeks, there should be something available. So I'd let it run until that time. And then if that come back saying, oh, you actually can't train, then I would seek alternative situations. Like I'd just be trying to find something to make it work.
Do you find that you are the sort of person, like, no matter what happens around you, you will stick to your routine 100%?
And if prep's the perfect example. If I knew I had to do something that day and the time, when it comes to prep, the variables that could never change was training, cardio, food. And those times I would never change if I could help it. If it didn't really matter when I ate my first meal, then I'd try and get everything done before my first meal. But as soon as I started my day, if I had to fit something in between my meal times, it had to be in between my meal times, just because I wanted to keep the strict routine.
And what do you think would happen to you mentally if your routine was taken away from you?
I'd not be very happy.
But what do you think would actually happen?
I wouldn't know, because I haven't done it.
Well, yeah, okay, we don't need to go down that road then, if you don't know.
No, it has happened. When I broke my leg playing American football, obviously I couldn't train, I couldn't play American football, I couldn't do anything. But I feel, because I know there is always light at the end of the tunnel in regards to me getting back on, it doesn't worry me that much. I just have to control the rehab process or the physio process, whatever you want to call it.
So your focus shifts into
the next bit.
Yeah.
That's another thing that is maybe not a good thing in my head, is that I never enjoy the present. I'm always, what's the next thing? Like what? Same thing, like even after this, what have I got to do after this? I've got to train. That's the next bit. And even when I'm training, I'm like, what I've got to do after this? Then the next thing.
Wonder why that is.
Don't know. I really don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Let's talk about your dad.
Okay.
If you want to.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
So, you worked with your dad always. Best friend.
Besties.
And then talk to us about this year.
Well, I'll start before that if you want.
Well, I suppose last year, yeah. So last Christmas time.
Last Christmas. Last Christmas? It was last Christmas. Yeah, but to actually start on the story.
Yeah, go on.
So, I think it was 2013. I remember it because it was always ingrained in my head. Not because of what happened. It was like the morning of it will always stick in my head. 2013, my dad had cancer in his kidney. And that, well, before we knew all of that, I was working in Weymouth at the time, Portland Prison, young offenders. I spent a year there. It was great. But when I was getting up in the morning, because I had to drive there every morning, I had to be there for 7, so I got up at 5 o'clock. And I got up, and my mum and dad are awake when I've got up for work at 5 o'clock, which is not normal. And I'm like, what's up? And they're just like, oh, Dad's got a pain in his leg or whatever. And I've just thought nothing of it. Gone to work, come back. And then he had a DVT in his leg, deep vein thrombosis. You know what that is, yeah? So then, because he had that in his leg, he had to go to hospital for testing and stuff. And I didn't know any of this. I think because I was working in Weymouth and I was, 21, 22, they just thought it's better for him not to know and just kept me in the dark sort of thing.
How do you feel about that?
I wasn't happy. Still not happy about it. But
I was going to say, how do you feel about it now?
Mainly just because then that comes back into I need to know everything. I'm one of these people that I ever need. If you tell me even a little bit about something, I need to know the whole story, or don't tell me nothing.
Is that so that you can potentially control what you need to control?
Yeah.
The more you know, the more you can control.
I can predict. So I can control everything, and then I can predict every bit of the domino effect that I was talking about earlier.
The potential outcomes.
So I can see every outcome and prepare for it. And I knew nothing. And then I used to go out every weekend. So because I was working in Weymouth Monday to Friday, I'd come back home on Friday night, go out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then go back to work Monday because I wasn't at home during the week. I'd make the most of my time at home on the weekend. So I went out Friday and I was in a pub and my mum and dad were there having a beer. And my mum's just like, at the time, I used to do a card trick now and again. And there was this little kid in the pub and he was just begging me to do them. So I was doing them. And then my mum's come over and gone, she just gave me a load of grief. And I was like, what the you? It was just like out of nowhere. Where she's like, you do card tricks. Or she gave me grief about what I was doing. I was like, what the about? My dad pulled her and just went, the like, leave him alone sort of thing. And then she went into one. And then my dad.
So looking back, she was upset.
Yeah, she was upset about something, but I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So then my dad's left. He's just left the pub. And then she's carried on, like laying into me. She's like, I can't remember what she was saying.
Was that quite out of character for your mum?
Yeah, because I didn't know where it was coming from. I was just like, I don't know what I've done. What have I done? I'm not even here. I'm not here during the week. And then I've come home and you're just me. So then I walked out of the pub. I was like, I'm not this. So then I walked out and then I rang my sister Helen and I just went, Mum's rucking me. I'm not even here most week. What's going on? And then she told me that Dad's got cancer.
Oh, your sister told you?
Yeah.
On the phone?
Yeah. And I was just like, great. Cried a lot. And then I
Was
went back.
that unusual for you to cry?
I think it was more because I just didn't expect it more than anything. And then I went back to the pub because my mate was there and we were supposed to go out. My mum had left by this point. Actually, he texted me saying your mum's gone. So I knew I could return without getting ringed again. So then I told my mate and I was just like, they don't know that I know.
Right.
So then I just went out and battered.
Is your response to things in life like this to shut down like that?
I think it takes me a while to process things in regards to how I'm going to react to it.
I wonder if that's because you've got so much to think about and you need to think about all the outcomes and everything. You almost have to like mentally prepare yourself to, maybe that's what that processing is like, I need a lot of time to.
Maybe. So then obviously the night finished and I went home or whatever. And then Dad come in my room in the morning and he's like, what happened? And then I told him and he was just like, I don't know what's wrong with her, blah, blah, blah. So he still didn't tell me. And then I think I saw my mum the following week or whatever. I didn't see her the rest of that weekend. I don't know if she went out. I don't know if we were like crossing paths where she was out of the house and I was in and then I would go out and she would come back or whatever. And then we saw each other the following week. She apologised and all that sort of stuff. And then that was, I can't really remember how they told me. The other thing that always springs to mind here is we went out for my 21st, or it was one of them. And he had the diagnosis at this point. So I can't remember if I knew. I don't think I did know.
Well, either way,
So
the
I was
outcome.
we was out at my 21st birthday party. We went for like, it wasn't a party. We went out for something to eat. And then my mum just started giving me grief again, like going in.
I think that was obviously her way. If she's upset.
I don't know what it was, but she was just going in and in and in. And then I just walked away again. And then me and my dad went outside for a bit. And then that's when we had a chat about it. Like both got upset about it and stuff like that. And I was just like, 21 and like, I'm not ready for this sort of thing. And I just remember him saying, I ain't anywhere. I was like, not. And then that was that. So then he had it cut out. And then that was that. So he had it cut out. He had a kidney cut out, and obviously you can live on one.
I hate seeing you upset. Finding this way harder than I thought.
I didn't got into the good bit yet.
Yeah.
And then, so he had it cut out, and then he had to have time off work while he recovered and all that sort of stuff, which is fine.
And he made a full recovery?
Full recovery, back to work. He'd done the usual where he went back to work within like 2 months and he was still in pain, but he just had to get house because that's just what he was like. He couldn't be at home. So then what happens then is obviously you go back for like...
Can I interrupt you? Does your dad have the same thing of wanting to control everything?
I wouldn't know. I assume so.
Okay.
I would assume so because that's probably where I've got it from.
I'm just you telling me that he just wanted to get straight back to work even though he was still bloody in pain. But that's his routine. That's what he can control.
Yeah,
he probably just wanted normal.
Yeah. And that's what he was like throughout any sort of inconvenience he had health-wise. He hated just sitting at home. He'd do it for a week. So when he had the kidney out, he'd stay at home for a week. And he was like, I've had enough now.
Yeah.
And then he went back to work probably earlier than he shouldn't have. And I remember our boss just being like, if you need to go home, you go home. He was like, yeah, all right, whatever. And she was like, no, if you need to go home, you go home. He was like, yeah, that's fine, but I'm not going home. And then I can't remember for the first year, I don't know if they do like a scan every 3 months or whatever, but then after the first year, it went to like yearly scans where they obviously scanned it to make sure it's not come back or anything like that.
And then how many years until, so that was when you were 21, so how many years until last Christmas? When he was
I would have been 30.
Okay.
So the way the NHS do it is that they'll scan you for 5 years, and then after the 5th year, you don't need any more. Well, you can argue whatever you want, but you talk about money and what it costs and all for a scan. So after the 5 years, it was always, you've got the all clear. They can't say it will never come back because if they do, then their license, you could sue them, blah, 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 blah. So after 2018, it was like, you've had the all clear, blah, 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 blah. And then he started, I couldn't really tell when.
Last year?
Well, I'm more on about before then, when he was starting like becoming anemic and stuff like that, where he was just not his normal self, but he'd sort of like pushed through. And then we found out he was anemic, and he had every test under the sun. Like he had the camera in the stomach, the camera us like multiple times because he's anemic. And they couldn't find out where it was coming from. They assumed he had an internal bleed somewhere, and they were trying to find it and do something about it, but they could never find it. So he's had all these tests, and they're like, we don't know.
Did you used to talk to him about how he was feeling? Like, when these health problems were going on, and like when it was apparent that his health was not in a good place,
we would talk about it just as like blokes. We would just more than talk about.
I'm just interested in how men talk about.
We would never say like, are you scared? We would just talk about what's the plan from it. It was never.
So you're always talking about the solution.
Yeah, it was never like, oh, how do you feel at the minute? It's all like, what the are we going to do about it?
Do you wish you had asked him how he felt at the time?
I mean, probably yeah now, but at the time it was never. That's what I'm saying, is that it's never. We never had the relationship where it's like. We'd always say like, are you all right? Like, how you feeling? Blah, blah, blah. Like, just in general.
Like you would ask someone.
Yeah, but it was never, how do you feel about having a camera or whatever? It was just always, well, it's got to happen. So it doesn't really matter what you say. You got to get on with it. And that's just how we were. So he's anemic, and then they put him on like iron tablets and all that sort of stuff. And then he had a blood transfusion. Well, not a blood transfusion, that's a lie. He had an iron transfusion. And he was on, for about 2 weeks after his transfusion, he was on top of the world. Like, it was like he was normal self, blah, blah, blah. So we was just like, it obviously works.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't he have another transfusion? Because they wouldn't do it, but on his bloods, the iron tablets they were giving him, he was like having 2 a day or whatever. He was just under the level of what they would class as like anemic. But he still wasn't right. And then I'd go and see my mum and dad at the pub sometimes, and they would be not arguing, but we'd talk about dad's health. And mum would always be like, he's just not, she would say stuff like, and she'd probably hate me for saying this, but she'd just be like, he's lazy, he just sits on the sofa all weekend and does because you don't, and me and mum have always said, you either use it or you lose it.
Maybe that was a bit of
I think it was more fear.
Frustration. No, frustration. She's thinking, come on, you don't want to make whatever it is, you don't want to make worse. And that's just because she cared so much.
Yeah, but then the flip side, he felt like and didn't want to do anything. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And mum's just being the usual, where she wants him to do something about it, and then they just start clashing.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we now? 23, well, 22 Christmas.
Yeah, end of last year.
We have Christmas, all that sort of stuff. And then I get a phone call middle of January 23 from mum saying dad's in hospital.
I'll never forget that night, because your mum would never ring you at that time.
Well, set the scene. I was at your flat Sunday night watching Red Zone, living the dream, get a phone call at 8:30, and I'm just like, So yeah, mum rang me saying dad's in hospital. He just couldn't speak. He just kept slurring his words. And then he sort of came round from it, and they obviously took him. Mum thought he was having a stroke because he couldn't speak and all that sort of stuff. So he went in the ambulance. He wasn't having a stroke, but they thought he was. So they put him in hospital. Mum told me, obviously not very happy about that. Went and saw mum, stayed with her the night, and then we went and saw dad in hospital the following day while we were waiting for like tests and stuff. So he was in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I want to say, while they were doing every and anything test sort of thing. And then I think Wednesday we were all there. So it was, Helen wasn't there because she lives in London, but me, mum, Joe, and obviously dad were there. And then the doctor's come in and just gone, I want to talk to you about your scans. And we're all there, and she goes, do you want these people to stay here for it? And he's just gone, yeah, they're my family sort of thing, because they don't know if we're friends. And then she's just gone, all right, I need to go get another doctor sort of thing. And then we've just all gone, good news then. If it was good, you would just come out of it sort of thing. So then she's gone about 10 minutes, which felt like an hour. Because we're just there going, now just get on with it. Come back, basically tell us he's got cancer everywhere. He's got it in the liver, he's got it in his adrenal glands, he's got it in his hip, and they're not sure about his lungs, but they think he's got a little bit in his head as well.
What was your first fear in that right then?
My original fear was his family history has got a history of dementia. So when mum said he couldn't talk initially and stuff like that, he's got dementia. And I couldn't think of anything worse, because they just fall away. His mum had it, his brother had it, and I'm like, you ain't far tree, mate. You're asking for it. So that was my initial thing. But obviously Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when we were with him, he was talking like there was no tomorrow. You wouldn't know any different.
I mean, in that moment when they stood, those two doctors come back in that room and told you as a family what that was, what was your first?
My first initial thought was,
right.
Like I find it very hard to not be realistic as much as it's my dad. I'm like, in my head, after you've just said what you said, what you've just basically signed as death wish, you know what I mean? There's no, I know enough to know that you ain't getting away from this.
Mm.
And it's just time.
Do you think you were that real with yourself to prepare yourself for outcomes, like you said?
I probably wasn't, when I got told it there and then, I probably just thought, what the am I supposed to do now?
Mm.
But then it just hits you straight away thinking, where'd you go from there? As much as I think about me, I couldn't think of anything worse when we've had this conversation before where, what would you prefer to do? Would you prefer it goes two ways. If I was in my dad's shoes, I'd never want to know because now you know you're on the clock. If it was affecting you personally, you just want to go and you sleep at some time and you never know. But from a family point of view, selfishly, now you know you're on the clock. And you actually have time to spend with whoever your family member is. Like if it was me personally, and I wouldn't want to know. But so we got told, which obviously blew us. And then that was sort of it really. It was like he got put on because it was, how can I describe it? They put you in a category, like I think it's 1 to 4, where if you're like mentally capable of speaking, it's mainly they test you to see if you're capable for treatment. Like, can you speak? Can you walk? Are you a fully functioning adult? Like, can you look after yourself? If so, then they'll put you on some sort of treatment. But if you can't speak, if you can't walk, if you can't look after yourself, then they'll just put you probably on palliative care just to try and make it as easy as possible for you. So he got, because he could look after himself at the time, he got put on some drugs that were to help reduce the swelling in his brain because he had cancer in his brain and the cancer was basically making his brain swell and causing stress on the right-hand side of his body. So it was on the left side of his head. So it was making him lose function on his right-hand side of his body. So this steroid would basically release the pressure on his brain and he could function. But, go on.
Sorry, I just had a thought in my head. The dynamic of your family, was your dad always very much the head of the family?
Yeah.
So as soon as this happened, did you feel a shift as the next male? Obviously, you've gone from not puny, but you've grown into this physically massive man. You're very headstrong. You're very aware of your surroundings, outcomes, that kind of thing. Did you feel, was there a moment where you just thought, I've got to be the top now? When was that?
Straight away. Which is not a nice feeling. Because now I feel like I'm running the show.
Do you still feel like that now? Do you think you'll always feel like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mine now.
Is that a lot of pressure?
Initially, I think it was. But now, like, the way it's played out, I think I've eased into it. I took it on the shoulder straight away, thinking now it's my turn I've got to look after everyone, sort of thing.
And you're doing a very good job at that, just so you know.
Thank you, my sweetheart. I appreciate that.
Your dad was poorly. Talk to us about when he passed. When was that?
So my dad died on the 23rd of June this year at dead on 8 o'clock. And I made a joke about it, which wasn't really a joke at the time, because I texted you saying he's gone dead on 8. As in, like, dead on 8 o'clock, as in time, but then he's actually dead at 8 o'clock. Yeah, I mean, if you can't laugh.
And you were on prep at the time?
I was on prep at the time.
So, Mr. Control, talk to us about what you did.
I told him. I knew what show I was doing, and as he was getting worse and worse, I was doing a show at the end of July or the beginning of August. I said to him, see you got to wait. And he didn't. He's out of order. Selfish. I think, if anything, that just made it easier for me from a prep point of view, because I was already on it in regards to doing everything I need to do. And then if anything, it just made me do it even more.
I don't think you realise the amount of people in that position, if that had been going on a prep,
well, yeah,
they would have sacked it straight off.
Well, yeah, towards the end of his life, he couldn't look after himself, and my mum couldn't look after him either, so he had to be put in a care home. So I would go and see him for at least like 3-4 hours every day while on prep, which I'm not looking for a back. I don't care.
Yeah, but babe, also acknowledge that's so much to go through, and the fact that you went through that, the actual loss. I remember the night he died and you came round and we had the cuddle, we had the shock, and I just said, like, "Do you want your next meal?" Like, I didn't know. And I remember just saying to you, like, "What do you need? Do you need routine?" And it was, yeah. And I never even questioned it. But to go through that and the lead up to that and everything, like, I don't think you really give yourself a lot of credit for what mental strength that takes.
Well, maybe not, but in my head, it's just get on with it. That's just the way it is. It was gonna, whether it happened when it did or it happened 10 years from now, which I would have preferred. That's a couple of times I'll just think, because the world's still spinning when he ain't here, because that's just not fair. But then I also think it's what it is.
Yeah.
But
do you think you kept your routine because of the need for control?
If I let that take control of me and let it make me spiral, it would have just been against everything that I ever believe in, realistically. And he wouldn't have let me do that either. If anything, I know for a fact he would have just been like, well,
don't let what's happening to me
you've still got commitment to make, no matter what that is. You better go on with it.
When I was saying about the pressure you felt to kind of take on his role as head of the family, obviously you've also taken on, in the last few years, me, the girls. You've gone from a single bloke basically doing whatever he wanted.
Living on my own, living the dream.
Living on your own, picking your nose and not worrying about anything. And in the last 3 years, you've taken on a woman, 2 children. You've taken on the role as head of the family, of 2 families, I'd say. Do you think that's impacted your mental health? Do you think that's changed you a lot as a man?
Yeah.
In what
It's
way?
changed my perspective on a lot of things.
In a good way, in a positive way?
Yeah, all day long. Like,
do you feel supported?
Yes and no. It depends. It depends on what it is.
Elaborate.
It goes back to me controlling what I can control. And if I know the answer, no matter what it is, then it doesn't matter what. Even if I speak about it. So yes, I feel supported in many ways. But when it comes to me actually doing my own thing or whatever it may be, I know it's still down to me to do it. So no matter, I could have no support or I could have all the support.
Right.
No matter what the question is or whatever I've got going on, it's still down to me to do it. So whether I had someone in my corner go on, you can do it, or I had no one going, nothing. I'm still going to do it anyway.
Regardless.
Yeah.
Well, we actually didn't even get through these questions, so I don't know.
I feel like...
Imagine our conversations at home. You chews my ear off. It's constant. I'm just joking.
You're joking.
I'm glad you feel supported, and I think that that's all we can ever ask as adults, trying to navigate through, like, especially being parents. There's that thing I read the other day about be kind to your mum because it's her first time here too. And that's the same, like, I know that we seem so sure of ourselves. We're doing what we're doing with our lives, running, coaching businesses, working, looking after children. We're still learning all the time. And that's probably, the mental load is so heavy. As long as you do feel supported and you've got people to talk to, that's all we can ever...
That's what I said to my mum when my dad couldn't speak and he was just like, not incapable, but he was in the home and he couldn't really talk about anything. The one thing I wish I could ask him was, as much as I could ask any woman I know how to deal with it, I wanted to hear it from him. So how did he deal with the death of his dad? And I couldn't ask him that. And that's one thing I hate. But
now you
once
know.
again, it is what it is. No, but I wanted, where I was always get everything advice-wise from my dad, no matter what it was, whether it was work, personal, he would always be the one I could lean on because he'd tell me straight what it was. I wanted him to tell me how he dealt with the death of his dad. And I know what he would have said.
What would he have said?
He would have just said, it is what it is. Like, get on with it. It's but you can't change it. So you either choose to accept it or you ruin you. But I wanted to hear it from his mouth.
I like to think, I know you wanted to hear that from his mouth, but with everything that he's taught you in your life, you already had the tools to know.
I know that. But me being selfish, I wanted to hear it from his mouth. And that's the one thing that annoys me. But as I said earlier, if I have, like, don't get me wrong, I always have those thoughts. Like when I went to bed last night, I can't remember what I was thinking about, but it always comes back to him. It's always like, what would he be doing right now? Or anything I'm thinking about, I know what he would have done. Or it doesn't even have to be related to him, but it will relate to him in one way or another. And if I'm not remotely tired, I'll be there for about 10 minutes. And I'll just go, stop it, because you won't sleep in a minute. But that's a nice thing. I have dreams now and again where I hear his voice, which is quite nice.
Maybe one day I will tell you.
I know, I wish. But I said to him, I was like, I'll even let you haunt me.
Yeah, whenever I hear a noise in the house, I'm like,
Eric.
Stop it. Stop haunting us.
Yeah.
Funny. Thank you so much for opening
Thank
up.
you.
I know that's the first time you've spoken about it, so I really appreciate it.
Publicly.
And I love you. Thank you.
Love you very much
Thank you for
too.
being brave. And would you just want to end this? Could you please end this on a bit of advice to another male who perhaps does shut down a lot and just struggles? Like I gave that little advice to somebody who's struggling, maybe just write it down and give it to the person. Do you have anything that you might want to leave with someone?
It's so hard for me to give one bit of advice on this because it's, from a male point of view, context is everything. Where if you've got something going on that is directly affecting your life, whether it's you've got something at work where someone's annoying you or whatever, it's like, how much can you control that outcome? If you can't control it to any outcome, leave it alone. Like, just let it happen and it doesn't bother you. But if you can do something about it.
Okay, but somebody's struggling and they need to talk. How would you advise them to be able to do that?
Speak to your best mate. If you don't feel confident enough speaking to your best mate, then you need to do something about it or it'll ruin you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us on the Upfront Podcast. We'll see you next time.